Good morning, folks, and welcome into the half. Though I guess, as we have often come to call it when there are guest hosts or when we don't have everybody here, when we don't have Aaron, this is the quarter. So I am Eric Campbell. You can find me often at erichcampbell.com, among other places on the internet. And usually we have a bigger format. We have our good friend Aaron Montgomery here to chat with us, but today it is just me. So I will be covering some topics, but what I really would hope for today is anybody who tunes in live, if you are here, if you are live, you are watching this right now, by all means, jump in, ask me questions about anything in the decoration world, whether it's embroidery, as I am often known for, whether it's e commerce, whatever it is. Feel free to join in. Feel free to ask questions and hey, derail the show because the show right now is me because our friend Aaron Montgomery is currently away. He is flying from a family matter that he had to handle. So all good wishes to Aaron for taking care of things, and hopefully he's doing okay right now. But he'll be back in town, back in for the half shortly. But for today, you've got just me. So if you didn't know me, I'm somebody who did embroidery for a great deal of my life. If you do know me, if you came here from the Taylor Guys, you already heard our origin stories today because originally today we were going to talk to Zach DeWorst, or no, actually Zach Acorn. Sorry, used the wrong name there. About being a self-made printer and his arc in printing, but instead, and I'm going to recap a little bit of two regular guys today. We ended up talking, me and Terry. So Terry Combs, a screen printer extraordinaire and a person who really loves a good time study, and I talked about how we came into the business, how we became who we are in the industry, and kind of our career arcs. So, what I'm going to talk about today is a little bit about that, but also about other things that were related to the show, like how do we improve processes, what brought me to want to teach, and what I think teaching does for us, what I think education does for us, and honestly, a little bit about the two other guys today, how things go wrong and how you soldier on, how do you carry on when things aren't how you expect them to go. I think those are great topics. So if nobody else offers anything else, I will certainly jump in and talk about that. Otherwise, if you guys want to chat, jump in. Like I said, I'm here to answer questions. This was originally envisioned as a Q&A, though Aaron and I kind of started having some other topics, and certainly we will be shortly getting to weekly wins and challenges. Like I said, Q&A, but I'm offering Q&A up the entire time instead of just the recap. So, like I said, original recap, what did we do? Terry Combs and I talked about our arcs in the industry. And I will say hi to a couple people who are here real quick first. Ramona says, hello, just me. And I'm like, yep, it's just me. But you're right. Hello, I'm glad to have you here. And Peggy says, hi, Peggy from Lubbock, Texas here. Hi, Peggy. Happy to have you in as well. We always talk to the people who are on live and who say hi. But to really guys recap, our arc into the industry. Terry talked about his original arc where he started out as someone who was on the other side of shirts. He was in his college bookstore. That's where he worked. And as they had trouble getting shirts in on time, he started printing blanks for them, got equipment, and started his own shop. And not to age Terry, and I feel bad when I say this. We always have the joke. He's like, "Oh, I started my first screen printing shop in 1979, and that was when I was born." The problem is, unfortunately, at this point, that ages me too. Because then I have the very young folks who often tell me, because I've been writing since the early 2000s, that I'll hear, hey, I've been watching your stuff or reading your articles since the very first time I started working in a shop. And I'm like, oh man, the age hurts. The good thing to hear from all this is, though, that Terry and my arc have some similar things to them that I think are useful. If you wonder how Terry got to know all the things he knows, well, it's because what he says naively thought that everybody tried to learn things and tried to improve and really work on process. And so he just kept on learning. He didn't stop. He kept on learning and analyzing and reflecting on things. And that's very similar to what I did. When I first started out, I was a machine operator who started out as being a box handler, is what I always joke around about it. I was a guy in the back of a truck hucking boxes of t-shirts around, ended up as a machine embroidery operator because they needed some extra hands. And like, as Terry often says about his degree, armed with my up and coming degree that I was still working on in English and medieval studies, I became an embroiderer. And from that, I wanted to learn. So when I saw that there was a computer in the corner, I asked what it was. Turned out to be a digitizing system. Messed around, peeked under a dust cover, and ended up with a massive 20-year career, 20-plus-year career now. These are just things that can happen when you investigate. What I will say is interesting about listening to his arc, my arc, and the career arc of so many people in the business today is that those who have made something happen, those who have gotten somewhere often are the kind of people who thought, this is something where I should dig in and understand what I'm doing, and to have at least enough of a reflective bent to say, hey, is this really working the way it should be? And by the way, it doesn't mean you have to be self-made. I think sometimes when we talk about people being self-made, though it is commendable to be self-made, like I say, I was self-taught as a digitizer. I learned from the manual of the software I had and trial and error, and by analyzing and looking at the files of other digitizers we had hired on previously or who were in the back catalog from the long time operations of the shop that I was at. That's how I learned. But the thing is, being self-made, being self-taught, it sounds fantastic. Sounds like, wow, we real pull yourself up by the bootstrap story. Sure. But how much more could Terry or me or any of the people who have had to do that, how much more could we accomplish if those early things, those early pitfalls we fell into were smoothed over by somebody who was educating? And that's why Terry and myself and many others who are here, including Ramona, who's in the comments now, help people and teach and put out content like this, because we all firmly believe that by helping everyone, that the entire industry gets better. And I thoroughly expect that people who come after me, who did grow up reading my articles and the articles of all of my fellow embroidery writers and educators, and the videos now, the massive series of videos that are out there from everybody, the content, the social media content of all the digitizers and embroiderers, these new decorators will start with themselves firmly planted in good foundational understanding, and then hopefully get beyond what I ever did on the shop floor. I am glad for them to surpass me as I eventually finish out my run. Don't get me wrong, I'm not done yet. I'm still making stuff and doing stuff and developing stuff. But I'm happy for them to stand on whatever shoulder I can give them, whatever boost I can give them, however I can lift them up. I'm happy for that to happen. I was glad to hear Terry say the same thing. And also that he just likes to show up and attack a challenge. Another interesting thing, Terry left a very decent position working for massive contract screen printing, managing production, because he got to a point where he had refined the production. He had, 5x'd their production capacity, and the challenge was over. And so he left to take on another challenge. And that's kind of cool too. People who will engage with a challenge, kind of feel like the obstacle is the way to something better, I think do some pretty amazing things. And Terry's an amazing guy. And that's not just me blowing smoke, because he's not here to listen to this one, probably. I don't think he's a half watcher. But hey, so Terry did a great job. I like to think I added a couple of moments that were good, hopefully at least that I was vulnerable and let you folks see a little bit about what it really was to start out in the industry. And we had some good information. I think the other thing that was funny that both Terry and I talked about is that sometimes you're writing to learn something yourself or to explain something. And my early articles and blog posts really were because I was not the head of my company. I was a digitizer, e-commerce manager, and operator. When I first started writing articles, it was, boy, here's what's going on in the shop floor. And I wish someone would listen in the decision-making capacity at that first shop. I wish somebody would listen to what we need to do. These are the things that are going wrong. And if we tried to address them, how much better we would do. And nobody's listening to what's happening on the floor. And Terry's were often, here's this thing that I'm trying to formulate. I'm going to write this and learn how to do it so that I can teach the people who I'm actually working with, who I'm consulting with. And if I can get them to learn it from this information, then that's something I can take and teach to everybody. And then everyone will be ahead of the game. So really cool stuff today on Two Regular Guys. I think a lot of it was interesting just because that career arc is interesting to look at. Terry, manual press, home built exposure unit, 1979, just dragging squeegees and doing the thing. He's pushing squeegees, throwing ink through screens, making it happen, and goes from that to massive production floors and on and beyond into the educator you know him as now. And I'll say, even for myself, I started as some guy who had no intention of doing embroidery, was not an embroidery artist or a graphic artist to start. Like I said, English and Medieval Studies degree, and decided to investigate something that was a little bit more than was required of him at a job, and then turned it into a career, which I now do and teach and travel on. So it's interesting to see where people get there. And also to say, hey, the other thing is the people who were originally writers, both to us, Terry had a book from Scott Fresner about how to print t-shirts. I eventually, sadly, later into my first years of doing this job, found industry magazines. Our heroes were the writers of the material that we write now. And it was cool both to find out, or to meet those heroes, and then to find out they were normal people, and then to realize that we too could provide that for a generation of folks coming up who needed it. People like me who really didn't have anybody else who was in my career and didn't know anyone for many years personally until I had already been well established in my actual job. Did I ever find someone else to talk to about what I did? And I think that kind of being out there doing it on your own, it's easy to lionize that and say it's great, but there is something fantastic about community. And I'm glad that we, both of us, Terry and I, got to be in a position to both meet our heroes, find out they're normal people, and then become the people who are doing that thing we needed back in the day. I think that's great that we all have that. By the way, if I haven't said it before, I'm just going to say it again, and you've probably heard it. Any one of you out there has a valuable perspective that is needed in this industry. If you are just starting out, people who are storied and who have been there longer than you need your beginner's mindset, need to understand what people are looking to figure out, and your new, fresh perspectives that come from the generation that you come from and the influences that are part of your life. If you're in the middle of your journey, people who are younger than you in this journey need to see that experience you've had. People who are veterans need to see how it is now at this time, at this day, this year, to be in that mid stride of your career, in that fully production mode. And hey, if you're at the end of your career, that's the place we usually say, or at further on in your career, I won't say the end, you've got some story, some history behind you, then everyone should benefit from the things that you've done, the things that you learned, and the trials that you survived. So anyone at any time has a voice that is worth sharing. So you get out there and share. And yes, I mean any of you. You have something to share that is valuable to all of us. All right. So that's the Two Other Guys recap. Really, it was all about where do we come from, making yourself. And also, the funny thing is, we did all of this on the fly, no preparation whatsoever, because when Zach originally was going to be on the show, he said, all right, I'm going to talk about being self-made. And we're like, all right, hey, well, let's talk about how we got ourselves into this mess. And what I'll say is, no shade to Zach. We'll try and get him back on the show. But it was a good show nonetheless, and it was really enjoyable to sit and honestly get to talk with my friend Terry about the business. That's what we like to do and how we all started. So wonderful thing there. But I think the other thing that's interesting is when things go wrong, even sometimes spectacularly, like let's say you have a live show and no one shows up. The thing to do is to lean into it, to do your best, be vulnerable, and do the work. Just do the work. Keep showing up. The consistency matters, and sometimes the consistency over time will not only get you more comfortable with the problems that come up, but will honestly outshine it. If you don't think of every single at bat, if you want to say it that way, to use a sports metaphor, if you don't think of every single project as the beginning and end of your career, as a current judgment of how good you are at the thing as a person, as a decorator, whatever it is, if you think of it as one small part of a larger body of work that will continue beyond this one event, you're going to do better overall. You're going to keep getting back up. And let me tell you, over time, that the truth of the matter is the things that felt like world-ending emergencies while they were happening are barely a memory sometimes down the road. Or better yet, are a memory that I cherish because I remember what it was going like through it and how I survived it. So, like I said, thinking about your career arc and looking at your shop and looking at the processes and the flow in your shop and analyzing what's going on, stopping to take time to review how your shop is running, how your website's running, how your decoration's running, walking through all the steps. We talked about the process of what in software is like called dog fooding, where we go through and use our own products so that we know how it works. So making an order through your website from start to end, including putting in your actual credit card, doing a job with your shop and walking it from the absolute beginning through the end of the process. These things are also really valuable, but I think it also goes into that category of reflection. If we don't take time to reflect on how things are running, to actually look at what's going on, to measure what's around us, and that can come down to numbers and time studies, and can also come down to just stopping to take a moment to think about how the process is running, we may never get to that next level of efficiency. And at the same time, we should still see these things as stepping stones in a process, in a long road of production that we will continue on, and not weight them in such a way that everything is a world-ending catastrophe. We can continue on, and as long as we choose to continue on, failure is never fatal, though it is just about always educational. We got some comments here. Let me see what else is going on. We've got Ramona says, so I'm always thinking about topics for a CNC, and your two regular guys podcast sparked a thought. I need to educate my clients on how to educate their customers on what can and will not work with embroidery. Absolutely. Especially as a digitizer, Ramona, that's a fantastic idea. A lot of what I did really came down to helping people understand. When I was interfacing with our clients directly, a lot of the reason they brought me out, number one, because one of the great ways in a multi-person shop to start calming things down when things aren't going right in the embroidery process and the art spec process is to bring out the artist, because they feel like we've got a direct line to the person who's actually working on things. It's funny how many times it was like, now they're taking me seriously. They're bringing the artist forward to talk to me directly. And people really enjoy that. Sometimes they're like, oh, I get some direct input. That's not for everybody. As an outsourced digitizer, though, you especially have to rely on your customers who are decorators to explain the things that are reasonable to customers and to put it all out there in the beginning. So that's an absolutely great topic to teach people. And for any decorator, it is useful by far, is more useful than you think to do education. There are always going to be customers who do not want that education, who don't want to learn everything about the process. They want to hand you money, get back shirts. You are the shirt box. The things come back, embroidered as expected. That those people exist and they're always going to be there. For the people who want to know a little bit, or especially who want to be the cool person in the room who knows enough to explain things, they are our best allies, because they're going to explain to the customer. And then they'll even say, hey, I was talking to my artist who says this. I was talking to my digitizer and they explained this is how it works. So if you do this, this is how you get your best result. And to that end, I'm going to gift you with my favorite phrase that I always use with customers. My favorite customer phrase is, if that were my design, this is what I would do. If it were my design and those are my shirts, I'd want it to be like this. Now, I know that sounds a little tricky, and I don't mean it to sound tricky, but it's true. You say, because I always tell people that the job of the digitizer is not to reproduce everything exactly as it was laid out in the art. The job of the digitizer is to produce the best embroidered result based on the original art. That's how I feel about it. And sometimes you just say that the medium of embroidery is a way. It has a way that it works. This is the way to make the cleanest looking, best looking embroidery that I can make out of that logo. And frankly, if it were me, this is what I would do with that logo. If this is my logo today, I'm going to look at these elements. Maybe I'm reducing some gradients. Maybe I'm changing the text size to make it more visible at handshake distance. 3 to 4 feet, if you don't know. Visible at 3 to 4 feet. As close as you're usually going to get to somebody. It's at least an American number. Not everybody across the world is as close or as far when it comes to handshaking and personal talking. But it depends on that. Like, where is that visibility? How is somebody supposed to look at it? Where does it live on the person in the space? How is it going to be looked at? That's going to affect what the value and the success of a design is. The most powerful phrase I've ever had is, if this were my logo, and especially if you talk to them and ask them about their goals, if this were my logo and my goal was to make sure people knew the name of my company, I'd increase the size so you could really read it from a little bit of a distance. If this were my logo and the goal was to make this car look the best that it does, I would make sure that I'm getting the colors right, and I would change a little bit of the color palette so that the blending was smoother. It's the stuff that you can say, like, I'm taking this on for myself. I am you. We are together in this. If we as a company are making this logo into the best thing it can be, this is what I would do for my result to be the best it can be. So make it your baby. It helps. Anyway, let's get a couple more comments in. We have Barb says, hello, Eric and everyone. Hello, Barb. Everybody's seeing her and saying hi. I love that. And this is great. She saying to Ramona, Barb says, I have samples to show customers and a ruler for visual, especially for caps and shirt logos. Yes. We kept a book of text at different sizes so that we could explain to people what text would look like at a certain height. And that was absolutely fantastic to have a physical representation of that. If you have a physical space, especially, great to be able to hand people that. And in fact, I also had a book where we used our company logo that had it rendered in multiple ways with fill as an applique with 3D foam, so that I could show people the different sorts of looks that were capable with different sorts of treatments when they asked about them. And I could say, hey, yeah, 3D foam looks like this. Here's my example of what 3D foam looks like. Here's what that same looks like rendered in, with applique. Here's what it looks like in a full fill. Here's what it looks like in a few different ways. So shop samples are great for that too. Lyndon says, good morning, Eric and everyone else watching. Good morning, Lyndon. Love that. And Ramona says, yes, exactly. Yeah, that's for real. The whole taking on your customer's logo and making it your baby is a big thing. Absolutely. And Nicola says, hi, Eric, love from the UK. And right back at you. Happy to have you here. Thank you for joining us. And Ramona says, thank you. Yes, enjoy the phrase, use it. Like the cheerleader guy says, credit me at least once. And then after that, you don't have to credit me anymore. It can be yours. Marianne says, just came on crazy day in New Mexico. Hey, same here, but a little further down in the south from you. She's out in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Further up north, I am down in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And for those of you across the pond, if you don't know, New Mexico is about the size of Germany. If you were wondering, our states are pretty big. They're kind of like countries into themselves. So I'm about an hour hard driving away about from Marianne, where she is up north. And Ramona says, I have sampler files. I think it might be time to bring them out again. Absolutely. I think the sample files are always fantastic to have. There are just some people who really are visual, and explaining things to them over and over again will not get you there, but showing them a concrete example will. So fantastic stuff there. All right, so we're going to go into our other sections of the show, as we often do. And by the way, weekly wins. We usually talk about our weekly wins. What are the things that we consider wins? Nothing too small. Anything that you feel proud of for the week, feel free to share in the comments. I would love to read it out and give you the kudos you deserve. We usually have Aaron and I talking about this stuff together, but I guess I want to put myself on the spot for weekly wins. And I would say weekly wins this week. And here's the funny thing. This is also soldiering on through a process that you didn't expect. I did a big advertising project, something that is a display for a trade show that's coming up. And it was a absolute slog. It wasn't that it was a bad thing to do or that it was not okay to do or I hated it or anything. But I was making a very large banner piece and I had to generate new art content for all of it. It was a massive grid full of art pieces, and almost all of them had to be generated from scratch to work with the size and the layout of the piece that I was working on. And here's the funny thing. Here's the challenge and the win. So we'll go back and forth between the challenge and the win. Weekly win is I spent an entire focused session getting this thing absolutely done on time and out the door. So here was a massive printed banner that took a tremendous amount of work to get it done, but I buckled down. I did not falter. I didn't jump back and forth between other work that needed to get done, despite the fact that I have a lot going on this week, and I got it done and dealt with. Here's the challenge that also is going to be where I reflect and teach myself some things. I got the date wrong. In the conversation for the date, I got the date wrong. And not only did I get the date wrong, I got the date wrong by a month. Needed July 1st, not June 1st. So if you are someone like me and you ever miss putting something on your calendar, let's think about doing a processing step in our work to make sure we write things down on the calendar. I actually wrote it down on the calendar thinking it was correct, but went back and found out in checking through the discussion that is not how it was. So unfortunately, I probably spent that time when I needed it for something else a little bit higher priority. So weekly win, stayed focused and worked on something that just needed a lot of grinding work. Challenge for me, making sure that I get things correctly on the calendar. When you say yes to something, process it onto that calendar immediately. Google Calendar works just fine and it's free. Otherwise, find your calendar of choice. If you have a job management system, awesome for you, especially if you're in an operating shop right now. Think about a processing step at the end of your day to look through the notes you've made, check out all the promises you made, and absolutely write them on the calendar with notes. If you have an email, copy it into it or link to that email in your calendar notes. It can be fantastically helpful down the road. But make sure you file things away, because even though I had a nice big weekly win getting that original draft of that big banner out, I probably had other stuff that needed my attention better that day. But I wanted to make sure I didn't leave any alerts. So weekly win, I dragged myself through it and got it done. Big challenge for the week, and something I need to ask myself questions about is, hey man, are you processing correctly and making sure stuff ends up on your calendar and to-do list and not just in a conversation where you know it was there? So there's my weekly win for today. If we have other weekly wins coming in, please, by all means, let me know what your big weekly win is. And by the way, thank you, Ramona. Ramona says, you're amazing. Good job. Thank you. I wish I was a little more amazing at scheduling, but I am glad that I put that big banner together and got it done. Now just to get the rest of the stuff that's on deadline. However, if you guys have any wins, I would love to celebrate them. And here's the thing, even if you don't want to share your wins this week, understand that we're all out here doing work. Like I said, I'm trying to be vulnerable and tell you the reality of how work goes for me sometimes. Other great thing I managed to finish. So since we're still on weekly wins, have an upcoming project going up that has some fonts involved in it, and I completed the second of the fonts that I was working on for this project. So really cool piece, and it's something that came out of my mind as just a thing I think needed to exist, and I got that confirmed, which was very nice. Somebody else got to look at it whose opinion I trust, and so made a couple of really great assets that I'm glad that eventually, not soon necessarily, eventually I get to share. So big weekly win on that one. Also, the other weekly win is I had to ask for some scheduling changes for some things. And though that always makes me uncomfortable, and usually I will just kill myself getting things done instead of asking for scheduling changes, I contacted people and made sure that got done. So that was cool. Weekly win also in just getting things dealt with. All right. So last few minutes of the show, I will just open it up. Challenges and Q&A. If you have any questions at all, up to and including, since I was talking about my personal arc in embroidery, if you want to ask me anything about my personal experience starting as an embroiderer, or my arc in my career, how I got to where I am, what I do, and what I think about that, feel free. As long as you don't make it too personal, and as much as I will get embarrassed saying it, I will answer just about any question, especially if we're talking shop. But challenges and Q&A, I would say, as I said earlier, challenge for me this week is to realize, once again, as much as I have to teach myself this, that though I do sometimes need to schedule better, I also need to leave some padding. And there are times where I have jumbled things right together where there is not a little padding. And when there are things that kind of come around to knock your schedule out, to cause you difficulties, you should have a little bit of wiggle room to make sure things are working. That is a normal thing to expect, that you will not be productive for every possible productive hour of your day. So challenge for me is to make sure that I leave room for the reality of life, because life is not clean and easy, and it doesn't always turn out the way we expect. Like today, sometimes the guest doesn't show up and you just got to soldier on. But when it comes to things that you're scheduling, we have to make sure that we're dealing with priorities correctly. So challenges for me today and for this week are to review my priorities again, review the things that need to get done, and get better at processing onto lists and calendars. All right. So we have a couple things here. We have from Ramona, reworking my workspace to be more efficient and accessible. Yeah, I mean, that's a huge thing. And the funny thing is, everybody thinks of this as a singular process. We're going to go through our workspace, look at what's going on. I always talk about the mise en place, like a chef, where you get everything where it's within arm's reach. So anytime you're working in a machine, you have everything you need. The truth of the matter is, the other half of that mise en place is working clean, where as you work, you're cleaning items and putting them away and fixing things. However, I think that we don't think about over time how the cruft builds up, how we put things weird places, how we move machines around. Maybe we add things to our system. Maybe we add some new thread, but we don't put it away the way it should be. We don't categorize it. We don't throw things together the way they need to be for us to reach them. This is sometimes what we call, sharpening the axe. How much more work could you get done if you spent a little bit of time sharpening the axe? The thing is, just like that axe keeps on getting dull with use, our spaces, our workflows degrade over time as we add things, subtract things, forget things, and literally clutter our spaces up. So always a good time to do that. And I'm going to say, hey, me too. I absolutely need to do a little work on that for my own production, and also for my own office work too. Need to clear up the office and just get things worked out efficiently, for sure. And then Ramona says, I've had customers say, I don't need it till next week. Take your time. I say you'll have it tomorrow. If I don't do it now, I might forget. That is one way to handle it, for sure. Scheduling is the other way. I tend to be a little bit more like Ramona. If something is critical, I tend to move it up to the front of the line. But this is one of those times where I realize now, not having organized myself, I should have maybe watched out when I moved to the front of the line. But still, you're right. So if there is time to do something, here's a true thing though. The whole get it done mentality, getting things done. If something takes less than 5 minutes and you've got 5 minutes and it's right now, sometimes the best thing you can do is just knock it out. Now, we have only a minute left. We have one more question real quick from Abby E. Teto Garcia. All right. So Abby or Teto, whoever's there, what resources are there to learn how to repair an embroidery machine? Now, it depends on the machine you're talking about. I am going to reference one person specifically who is out there teaching this and who is teaching at the DAX shows. And I'll go ahead and just write his name out for you. I don't have his stuff off the top of my head, but Bill Garvin, and I'm going to write his name out and put it on screen so you can see it. You hear me tapping away on the mechanical keyboard. Bill Garvin is a guy who is out there teaching at trade shows right now, including the DAX show. And I think he guys is at BG Tech Services. He is a technician who repairs embroidery machines, but he also teaches basic classes and workshops about machine repair, and he's out in Texas. So Bill Garvin is someone who absolutely helps. So Bill Garvin, he does teach that. I am not a person who did a lot of machinery repair, so I'm not the person for that. I am the digitizing guy. You want to learn more digitizing and embroidery specifics that way, I will teach you that, including some more technical, more artistic stuff. Bill also teaches some digitizing, though his stuff is generally more get it done, less stitches possible, straightforward logo stuff. My stuff will venture out into the artistic. But you want to learn more about machine embroidery repair, he is the first person who pops up to mind as someone who's out there teaching machine embroidery repair and maintenance on the road. So go check out Bill Garvin. Like I said, I think he is also at BG Tech Services, and he does a good job. Also, yeah, he does classes through Gunold as well. So maintenance 2.0 class through Gunold. So if you see classes and videos from Gunold, that is also Bill. All right, so I can't cut myself off or make this funny, but we are at the end of our half hour. Thank you guys for being here, and I can't wait to see you again next week. Take care of yourself, folks. Have a good weekend. Get some rest. And don't forget to enjoy the process. Talk to you later.